Hey guys, today we're looking at 1.6's homework, which was a worksheet, and let's get to it. So, this first problem says a number and 7 add to give 32. So, I really think it's pretty hard to teach how to model word problems. It's all about you being able to pick apart what you think is important out of the problem. And definitely, like this problem is fairly straightforward. A number and 7 add. Okay, so a number we'll call x and 7 add, right? So this is a number and 7 adding, and it gives 32. So a number and 7 add to give 32. So it models just like this, and then you solve it. So you'd subtract 7 from both sides, and you would get x is equal to 25. All right. So, the next problem. 6 fewer than 3 times a number is 9. 6 fewer than 3 times a number. So, this whole fewer than business tends to confuse students or trick students. And my advice is to think about a simple statement, like separate from these problems. Think about if I asked you, what is 6 fewer than 9? Right? How would you respond to that? If I were just looking at you and I said, hey, what's 6 fewer than 9? Right? What would you say? Well, you'd probably say 3 because when I present it to you like that, hey, what's 6 fewer than 9? You, in your head, you would immediately do the 9 minus 6 operation, right? Well, it's the same thing with this problem here. 6 fewer than 3 times a number. The difference is, we were saying, what is 6 fewer than 9? And we could set it up as, right, so this is that separate example, right? 6 fewer than 9, right? And you would think it would be 9 minus 6, because that's what you do. The answer is 3. 6 fewer than 9 is 3, and you do that by 9 minus 6. So the last piece came first, and then the fewer than created the minus sign, and then the 6 came last. So we do the same thing. This last piece after the fewer than comes first. And then the fewer than creates the minus sign, and then the 6 comes last. So we have to model 3 times a number. Well, that is just 3x. So what you've got is 3x minus 6 is 9, equals 9. And then you solve this. So you'd add 6 and divide by 3. So you want to add 6, if I can find the color I'd like to use. Add 6 and then divide by 3. And you will get 3x is equal to 15 and x is equal to 5. Okay, so moving on, we've got 11 more than a number multiplied by itself is 36. 11 more than a number multiplied by itself. Well, again, if you're confused about what operations to do, think about another problem where it starts off similarly, right? If I said, what's 11 more than 5? Well, 11 more than 5, hopefully you would think of an operation like 11 plus 5, or 5 plus 11, 11 more than 5, right? Whichever way you do it doesn't matter, since addition, you can switch these numbers and you get the same answer. So we don't have 5 though. We have a number multiplied by itself. So 11 more than a number multiplied by itself. So we don't know the numbers, we have x. And multiplied by itself, that means like times another x. Or we've got x squared, right? That's what this phrase translates to. Number multiplied by itself could either be x times x or x squared, because that's what the 2 as an exponent means. So we've got 11 plus x squared equals 36. And so, to get rid of the 11, you subtract it away. That's kind of hard to see, huh? You subtract it away. I know I'm using a lot of different colors, but whatever. And this is 25. And now, to get rid of a square, you square root both sides. And I used the same green again like an idiot. And you square root both sides. Squares and square roots undo each other. But there's a caveat. When you square root the other side, you need to remember a plus or a minus. And I will go into that right now, just briefly. So, if I were looking at x squared equals 25, what this is saying is that some number squared is 25, right? Some number times itself is 25. So think, what number times itself is 25? Well, you might think 5, right? Because 5 times 5 is 25, and that's correct, right? However, there is always a second choice when you're dealing with squared numbers here, and that would be negative 5 times negative 5, because a negative times a negative makes a positive, and 5 times 5 makes 25. So, in this case, there are two numbers that if you multiply it by themselves, you will get 25. And that is 5 and negative 5. So you remember this plus or minus whenever you square root away a square to account for this. And you get that x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 25. And the square root of 25 is 5. And so you get plus or minus 5. And what these plus or minus represents is two solutions. Either 5 and negative 5, right? So those are the two solutions. So that's your two solutions. And finally, this one is a really cool problem, I think. It makes you think outside the box. It makes you model specific values differently, but still related to each other. And overall, once you get the hang of it, it's kind of simple once you understand what to do. So, 3 consecutive numbers add to be 36. So, that's like saying, like 3 consecutive. Well, what does consecutive mean? Well, consecutive are numbers in a row, right? So, 1, 2, and 3 are consecutive numbers. 5, 6, 7 are consecutive numbers. Right? 8, 9, 10 are consecutive numbers. We have to find the 3 that add to be 36. Now, you could just trial and error it, right? Just go through all your numbers. But we are not going to do that. We are going to model it mathematically. So what we're going to do is look at the connection between something like 8, 9, and 10. All right? These are consecutive numbers. If I let 8, right, be x, just because, what is the relationship between 8 and 9? Well, 9 is just 8 plus 1, right? And then you get 9. So if we keep saying that x is 8 instead, then x plus 1 will give us this next value here. So then if you add 1 again, you get the next value, right? So if you compare it all to 8, then the consecutive numbers are like 8 plus 1 is the next number, 8 plus 2 is the next number, right? Because 8 plus 2 is 10. And those are how you could tie 9 and 10 in terms of 8. Right? 9 is just 8 plus 1, and 10 is just 8 plus 2. So if you start with x instead of like a number 8, then x plus 1 is your next number, and then x plus 2 is your next number after that, right? So this is just tying together this idea of consecutive numbers. If you added 1, that would be the next number. If you added another, that would be your next number, right? So all of these add to be 36. So we're going to use this string right here. X plus 1 plus x plus 2 add to be 36. And now you combine like terms. X plus x plus x is 3x, and then 2 and 1 add to be 3. And now you solve this equation. You would subtract 3 and divide by 3. Well, 36 minus 3 is 33, and 33 divided by 3 is 11. Okay, so you get x equals 11. I would work that out, but I ran out of space. All right, so there's your first 4 problems. Moving on to number 5. A U-Haul company charges $75 plus an additional $30 per day to rent their 12-foot truck. $75 plus $30 per day to rent their truck. Write a 2-variable equation where y represents the total cost to rent the truck and x represents the number of days you wish to rent the truck. All right, so how do we get the total cost of the rental? Well, it's based off of these charges here. It's always going to charge you $75. And then it's going to add an additional $30 per day you rent the truck. So the per day part is what we want x to go along with. X needs to represent the number of days you wish to rent the truck for. So right off the bat, you pay that flat $75. And then you add the $30 per day. So if you had it for 1 day, you'd pay $30 because 30 times 1 is 30. If you had it for 2 days, you'd pay $60. And that should make sense in the context of the problem. So if you put 2 here, if you had it for 2 days, you would get 30 times 2, which is 60, right? So the math works out. I always encourage people when they're doing word problems to think about it from just like a real world situation. Don't think about it in terms of equations and math to get your bearings, right? And then once you have the math, try to think about it back in terms of the word problem to make sure it makes sense, right? So this is A, completed, right? We've written a 2-variable, x and y, right? X and y, where y represents the total cost and x represents the number of days you wish to rent the truck. So if you rented it for 1 day, right, we've already gone through this. Now B, how much money would it take to rent the 12-foot truck for 5 days? So if x represented the number of days, all you have to do, guys, is substitute 5 into x, because that's the amount of days. So you're going to have, y is equal to, so this is part B, 75 plus 30 times 5, and that is 75 plus 150, which is 225. So it would cost you $225 to rent the truck for 5 days. And all things considered, that is not bad. That's probably on the far cheaper end. Okay. Next problem. Moving on to the final couple of problems. You borrowed $1,800 from the bank. First off, well, never mind. All right, so the bank requires you to pay 20% interest on top of the borrowed amount. If you can only pay $55 a week on your loan, how long would it take to pay off the loan? Okay, so you borrowed $1,800 from the bank, but the bank requires you to pay 20% interest on top of the borrowed amount. So the first thing you have to do is find out what 20% of 1,800 is. And this was on your latest practice sheet. I think it was like, what is 20% of 18? And I'll just let you know how to do that. You convert the percent to a decimal and then multiply it by the value. So to find 20% of 1,800, you multiply 0.20 times 1,800. And that gets you what you need. And I'll just pull my calculator up here. Give me a second. I don't want to make some stupid mistake. All right. Yeah. Okay, so 0.2 times 1,800 gives you 360. So you get 360. So that is what 20% of 1,800 is. Now, this is the interest, and you have to pay the interest on top of the borrowed amount. So what you need to pay is 1,800 plus 360, which is 2,160. All right? That is the amount you owe. Okay? You can only pay $55 a week. How long will it take to pay off the loan? Well, if you are taking away $55 a week, you need to figure out when 2160 equals 55 times your amount of weeks. If you can pay $55 a week, you need to figure out when that will equal 2160. Does that make sense? Some people set this up in their head and they do this. And they just go ahead and do this part in their head. They think, oh, well, we just divide it by 55. And that's exactly right. But it's because if you were to set up the problem, you would set it up like this, where you say that if you pay $55 per week, so the per part is multiplying, when would that equal 2160? And to solve that, you divide by 55, divide by 55. And you would get that x is approximately, pull my calculator back up, $39.27. Now, it's asking you, how long would it take to pay off the loan? And this is in weeks, all right? So you don't want to say it's going to take you 39.27 weeks. That doesn't make sense. You don't regularly chop weeks into decimals, right? So what I would do is I would round up, right? Or if you really wanted to get technical, I would break one into sevenths and then figure out how many sevenths of 1.27 is, but that's a little confusing. I would rather just say that it would take you the 40th week to pay your loan back, right? Because on the 39th week, you have not paid your whole loan back. But on that 40th week, the end of your, like the next payment you make on the 40th week, that is when you'll make up this little tiny chunk, all right? So I would say about 40 weeks or 40 weeks, okay? All right, so that's that problem done. A rec center charges $7 per person to occupy a single lane of their bowling alley, plus an additional $8 per game played. Okay, so a single lane costs $7 per person plus an additional $8 per game played. Now, I'm going to go ahead and specify. The lane doesn't care how many people play each game, right? The $8 is per game, as in like that's based off of the time you're going to sit there playing or bowling, right? So the varying price is only $7 per person, right? And then per game is $8. So another thing to say is that it's not that each person has to pay $8 per game. Each person can occupy one lane, and then based on how many games are played, that's like times 8. Right? So it's not that each person is paying for their own game. They're all sharing in the game's cost. Right? So model the scenario with a 3-variable equation. Let y be the total cost of your bowling. So that's going to be way out here, because the total cost is what you're trying to tally up. Let x be the number of games you wish to play. Let z be the number of people playing together on a lane. So basically you're just going to tie the correct variable to the correct number up here. So x is the number of games you wish to play. So which of these figures talks about games played? Well, this one, $8. So it's $8 per game. Whoa. No, $8 per game. So if x is the number of games, then it's 8 per game. Then you plus $7 per person. So z is the number of people playing. So that would be 7z. This is the formula for how much it would cost to bowl that night. It depends on how many people are in the lane and then how many games you all are playing. If you and 3 friends want to bowl together in a single lane and you want to play 4 games, how much would it cost? Well, first off, how many people are there? You and 3 friends. That's 4 people. So z is the number of people, so you're going to put in 4 for z. And then you're playing 4 games. So you plug in 4 for x, and you solve this. So you get y equals 32 plus 28. And you get 60. $60 to bowl that night. That's pretty cheap. For 4 people to go out, 4 games, it'd take you half a night to do that. All right. So there is your worksheet done. Hopefully you have been able to figure out how to do these problems. This is probably going to be the hardest part about your test because it's very difficult for me to give you practice problems without really helping you along. Right? So I encourage you to do the review if any problems are on the review like this. All right. Hopefully this has helped. I will catch you guys next time.